I wrote poems meant to be comic poems, and they were published in the high school paper. And a classmate of mine, he was a year ahead, introduced himself to me. Stanley Orsi was his name. And Stanley came from a family that was interested in theater. One of his sisters was an actress in the little theater movement in Chicago. Stanley wanted to write for the theater. And so he asked if I would collaborate with him. And my last year or two in high school, we wrote a great deal. We wrote sketches. We wrote song parodies. Eventually, we actually started to write some songs together. And in fact, some friend of his sister's who wanted to be a nightclub comic heard about us and asked us to write him some material. So we wrote him a routine. I think we wrote by the yard. It was $25 a yard. And we wrote him a pun-filled routine. It was called Goldilocks, the story of a blonde salmon. His career never went anywhere. I wonder why. When I was at Northwestern, I contributed a song to the WAMU show, and it was accepted. And it was sung by Charlotte Lubotsky, who later became Charlotte Ray. And we became very good friends. Charlotte was from her, I'm sure from her high school days on, she was a superb performer, a superb comedian. At any rate, my junior year, Charlotte had gone to New York on the Christmas vacation. And when she came back, she sought me out and she said, "Sheldon, this is an LP you have to hear, you especially." So she loaned me her copy of Finian's Rainbow. And I listened to it, and it was the first time I was really interested in theater, because I listened to the score, and I thought the music is wonderfully attractive, but it was Rip Harburg's lyrics. I thought they're saying something, constantly saying something, but they're saying it so playfully that it makes you listen. And I thought there are people who probably will disagree with what he's saying, but you listen anyway, and you're entertained anyway because of the way he said it. And I thought, I no longer want to be a violinist. I want to do this. I want to do what Rip Harburg does. And as a matter of fact, although I thought I was cursed, God was good to me. My last, after I was, it was my last year. After I graduated, I was playing with some dance bands. Something I was doing was wrong, and I got a muscle problem in my left shoulder. I went to my father's doctor, and he said, "Mr. Harnick, you have what we call Geigerkrampf, which in German means fiddle cramp." He said, "When I was a doctor in Vienna, I treated members of the Vienna Symphony, and it's a combination of muscular and nervous exhaustion. And you have to lay off the fiddle for about a year. And if you're lucky, maybe this will heal itself and you'll be able to play again." But I thought that was a curse because I wanted to play the violin. But it turned out to be a blessing because I couldn't play the violin and I had to pursue a career as a lyricist. So that was one of the reasons that I chose to go to New York. At that time, I could no longer play the violin. When I met Jerry Bach, I was so taken with his skill and what he was able to write that it was a thrill. As I say, when he would send me a tape of these 8 or 10 songs that he'd written, it was a thrill to sit down and listen to them because I knew that about 2 or 3 of them would be so exciting, and I was the first person to hear them. And then working with other people like Michelle or Richard Rodgers was also a privilege and a thrill. So I was not driven to write my own music. And one of the problems is that I'm not a pianist. It's very time consuming for me to write and to come up with something that is playable on the piano. And then usually I have to have the pianist tell me where I went wrong anyway. During rehearsals of Fiddler on the Roof, watching one of the scenes between Tevye and Golda, I thought, gee, I think it would be very funny if he turned to her and he sang, "Do you love me?" And she said, "Like what?" And then when we got to Detroit, I thought, okay, that's the first line of the song. But that was a very difficult song to write. but I wanted to write it. I took long walks every day, and I was very happy if at the end of the day I had maybe 4 lines. It took about a week, but at the end of the week I went to Jerry Bach and I said, here's what's supposed to be a lyric. I know it looks like a dramatic scene, but try and set it to music. And if you can't set it the way it is, but you can set it in any way, I'll change whatever I have to make it work. To my astonishment, Jerry said it exactly as I'd written it. So we showed it to Zero and to Maria Kornilova. They loved it, and they put it in very quickly. And I went to see it, and it worked. I had worried because I wanted to end it with something funny, and I couldn't think of anything funny. So I ended it with something I thought was real. And to my surprise, the first time I heard it, the audience chuckled at the end anyway. I think when Jerry Bach and I split, that was just so heartbreaking that I thought about that more than the state of the theater, wondering who I was going to work with and whether we'd get things on. It's still extremely difficult. It's always been difficult to get a show on, and maybe today more than ever. But shows get done. Investors still love them. They want there are great stars who are looking for vehicles. So who knows? In another 10 years, they may say this was another golden age. You know, who knows?
What advice do you have for up-and-coming writers today, knowing that they have fewer possibilities for the career you have had?
Go into dentistry. No, I don't have to give that advice, because if somebody comes to me, it's because he is already so driven to write for the musical theater that he doesn't need to be steered away from. I wouldn't want to steer anybody away from it if that's what they want to do. So I don't have to do that. Usually the advice I give is just to read as widely as they can, because you never know what story will move you to want to try and turn it into a musical. And the wider your frame of reference is, the more you're prepared to write whatever story comes along that excites you.